Okay, I'm Margaret Danielak of Danielak Fine Art in Pasadena, California. And with me is Julie Snyder of Workshops in France. And Julie is also a very talented painter who I've been representing for quite a few years now. And one of her paintings is actually over my shoulder that you can see that she brought back from France the last time she was in California. And so today we're doing a podcast and kind of an interview. I'm doing this with Julie on her platform. And why don't you just get started and tell me about yourself and how you got started and who you are and all that good stuff.
Okay, well, thank you, Margaret. It's an honor to be here. Even if I'm on a different continent, I'm kind of bicontinental these days, but it's all good. Um, so I'm here in France, and you can see this background is this beautiful chateau we're in, Chateau du Landelle. It's in Normandy. And this is my background. This is real.
Oh, that's the real background.
That
That's
is the
great.
real background. I'm in this
Oh, great.
gorgeous room,
Wow.
which we
Oh
could
my
show to
God.
everybody. You
Look
know,
at that.
this is,
Look at that. I like that. That's great. I'm losing. I
yeah, I know.
okay.
Maybe it's because I'm moving. Okay,
Right.
I'm gonna keep that still. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, we're back. We're back. And we held a couple of workshops here. So actually, my guests are busy drinking wine and eating moule and frites. So for those that don't know, that's steamed mussels and homemade French fries. So we're really enjoying.
Sounds good.
So I am here because I love working with artists and I love travel and I love painting alongside other artists. So I made this business, which is basically workshops in France. And we travel mainly in France, but also Italy and Scotland, where artists can come together and just enjoy that camaraderie and the connection that happens when artists, are side by side and working together. But you want to know where I came from? Can you hear by my accent?
Yeah.
I'm
A
from
country I
Scotland.
love very much. My ancestors are from Scotland.
Right. I mean, I'm almost slightly envious of your red hair, Margaret. That would go down very well in Scotland. But yes, I'm Scottish and of course born and bred in Glasgow, which is much more cultural than you might think, which was lovely. But I always had a passion for travel ever since my mother sent me on a cultural exchange to France when I think I was 15 years old. And that, planted a seed. But actually, right now I'm a dual citizen. I'm a United States citizen and a United Kingdom citizen. So I live in two continents. So
Yay.
yeah, and I am really happy about that. It just happened, so I'm very proud of that. But I'm an artist. I've always been an artist. I'm actually the daughter of artists. My mother was an artist. My father was a writer, and there was never any dissuasion by them that I should do anything but art. But much more like, well, you're an artist, so let's get on with it and do what you need to do. So I grew up in that environment with a very large family, which was great. And I went to art school. But I took a left turn during art school, and it wasn't anything except I was a bit of a crazy teenager. And I decided I wanted to travel instead. So at that point, I did travel. I ended up living in Spain. And actually, from that age of 19, I don't think I ever lived in Scotland again, although I go back frequently. I'm very proud of being Scottish, and I definitely have my roots there. But like I raised a family in the United States, and I've lived in Spain and all over the United States, and now I even live a little bit in France. So that's how far I've got.
So I was thinking today about how we met. Do you remember that?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, there was two. So there was like the real meeting, and then before that, were we not both like, or you were judging a show? I think that's when it was.
I was actually giving a talk
Oh,
in a space for one of the artists that you recently, not Jennifer McChristian.
Jennifer McChristian in her studio.
Yeah, and you were one of the participants.
Yeah, I think.
And at the time I had lost my figurative painter, who was my major figurative painter, and I found out that you did figurative work, and so you showed me your portfolio on your phone,
That's
and
right.
you are the first artist to do that.
Well,
Where
it was an
you,
eye touch. And actually, I was just trying to help you. I was like, oh, she represents artists. She should have one of these because look what you can do. You can put artwork on
what
this
you
if you
can
like.
do,
Yeah.
right?
And
Yeah.
yeah, that made a connection. But there was very interesting a couple of things you said during that talk that really impinged on me. And one is that you should always say thank you and thank the host. So after that, after showing you that and thinking nothing of it, I went back home and then I wrote to you and I thanked you for the presentation, which was very, very helpful. And then you wrote back and said, I want to come and see your studio. I'm like,
Right.
yeah. Oh, it was funny because
Yeah.
you said, I'll come to, like, on Wednesday. And I'm like, a studio,
Oh my God. Yeah.
while I'm in a house with young children and dogs and chickens. And, so I had 3 days to make a studio out of my house to make. I mean, I did paint, but you know how it is when you have kids, just do it.
Mhm.
But it was a very great experience because you got to see my artwork and then you just
Right.
represent me.
I
So,
signed you right then, and I remember the first thing we did was an event at the Women's City Club when I became before I think even before I became formal curator there
right.
in Pasadena at the Blinn House, which is now the home to the Pasadena Historical Society. But you we did some kind of small event there,
Mhm.
and sold a couple of paintings, but then there was somebody who came who really liked your work, and I think they came back to your studio and bought two or three other paintings. So it ended up being a very successful,
Right.
for a little 2 hour thing, it ended up being really successful.
It was amazing. I think you were giving a talk. There was some like women's group who were using the space,
Yeah,
all the
something.
art. And the
Yeah. So it ended up, yeah,
great.
the synergy was good in that. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
you
So tell me about
definitely.
workshops in France. How does that all work, and how would artists sign up, and what's the story there?
Well, great question, and thank you for asking. I mean, it started off as a completely selfish enterprise because I was like, how do I go to Europe? How do I travel? How do I have this experience with artists? Because I'd gone there to France with my mother and my sister and our combined families. And basically, my mother and sister kidnapped my children and said, you go paint. So I went out into a field and I began painting. And I wasn't even a landscape painter, I was a figure painter. But the experience really, really touched me. And I really felt the continuity of the artists that had gone before us. I thought, well, this is where they stood, this is what they painted. And then it began to rain, and it was under a tin roof and the noise of the rain. And I just thought I was in paradise. I said, well, this is fantastic. This is how they used to do it. And at that moment, I must have made a decision because I thought, how can I come back and share this experience with friends? And so when my children were a little older, because they were grade school kids, they were very young, but when they were old enough to basically separate the whites and the colors and wash everything in cold, I'm like, I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks, kids, you know. And I went to France and I put out the idea with some friends. And basically, what happened is I was being represented by you in Pasadena, but I was also being represented on Cape Cod with another gallery. And they had just had a bunch of actually very well-known artists now, but there were a bunch of guys that had gone to the main coast and they had a show there and it was all very successful. Then the next thing I knew, they were in Spain together and they were doing all this painting, it wasn't really like a workshop, it was more like an invitational. And they got in the magazine and they were doing the show and everybody was going nuts. And I thought, well, there's only one thing wrong with that picture, and that was that they were all men. So I said to
Right.
the gallery owner, I said, I'm going to France and I'm telling you because I'm going to create a body of work. And she then said to me, well, if you're going to do that, then why don't we have a show to celebrate that? And I said, well, we're going to have a show. Why don't we invite the other women that you represent the same,
Right.
also with some of the California artists that you knew, Margaret, and some other contacts in the area I knew. There was basically an invitational. 13 basically professional women went to France and we painted together. And it was just such a transformative experience. I went, I don't know what I have to do, but I'm going to do this again. And the 2 years later, I launched what has now become Workshops in France. And yeah, it was great. So it started small, but I just very slowly grew it. And now it's become its own thing. It's got inertia, it just takes off on its own almost. But I really, really enjoy it. And I love giving those experiences to painters because it's when painters come together and they can create these little groups and they can have that synergy together and they can influence each other and inspire each other, and magic happens. I mean, literally magic happens. And I'm part of that. So wonderful.
Well, one of the questions I had too, and we actually spoke yesterday, so you were telling me about your day, and it was amazing, all the different, things you had to juggle while you're there,
No
and that was
idea.
just the one day. And so, what is your greatest challenge in conducting, and managing these?
Well, I kind of compartmentalize it really into three parts. So when we're here, it's very intense and every moment's used up. And if we're not actually painting, then we're planning, or it's taxis, or talking to the chef, or actually building out contracts with future chateaus. I mean, it's just like full on non-stop. But I have a great team that works with me. Um, but then there's also the aspect of all the logistics that we do, which is booking and then hiring cars and thinking about, chefs and caterers and who to use and how do we get all the people there. And then there's the sales, marketing. So it's this three
Right.
areas of life. And so I just happen to be very good at marketing and passionate about what I do. So I actually don't know anybody that works harder than me. I mean, really, I'm working all the time on something I love, so fair enough. But yeah, that's what I do. So I mean, I can't even remember what I told you we were doing yesterday because it was such a crazy day. Where were we? Uh oh, that garden. That garden. Oh my gosh, this is an artist I never even heard of. His name is Henri, like Henry, de Sedané. And he made this garden like Monet's garden just down the road from the chateau. And we went there and we painted there. And there was a white garden and a blue garden and a yellow garden and an Italian garden and a lover's garden and a pond and
Oh
all
my
little
gosh.
areas. It was, with wisteria dripping, just dripping off the trellises. It was, you just couldn't have anything more beautiful. And so this artist was actually a post-impressionist. He painted technically like Seurat, but he was much more colorful, and he was part of this art movement called, in English, it would be intimacy, antimism, something like that. Um, and what he did is he would paint like an intimate part of his garden. There would be the table setting, there would be dappled light, there'd be things set on that table, like people were just about to turn up and have a meal together, and in the
That's
background,
beautiful.
the house and the
Yeah.
garden. Sensational. And so do you know how I found him? I actually went to ChatGPT and I gave him the address of the chateau and I said, what exists around us within like a
Oh,
25 miles around us that we might go to that might inspire artists? And it came up with this garden and this artist I never heard of. And then I started going to, it was Rodin that brought him here. Rodin, he was a friend of Rodin's and he
oh
brought
my God.
area. I know. And he knew Monet, and he knew Sicily, and he knew Pissarro because they all lived in this area. The River Was is around there, and we went to oh, it's just amazing. Like Auvers-sur-Oise, it's where Van Gogh lived at the end of his life and he died. We visited the room that he actually passed away in. And then we painted the famous church. There's a famous church there that he painted. And we're all out there painting, and it's just one thing after another, and then watching the clock and trying to finish and help other people and help people with their equipment. And, you're sharing brushes and tubes of paint, and it's just fabulous, fabulous.
Well, I should mention here that you have provided me, and I have under consignment several of your paintings from the, you know, Van
Adventures. Yeah.
Gogh's property and other places in France, and they're usually rather small pieces. Sometimes when people see them on my website,
Yeah.
danelakfineart.com, that they see them and they think that they're very large, but you can only paint what you can carry home in your luggage. So these
Home in
are,
your luggage
this,
and
this is
really,
the size,
yeah,
right? And so you can see my hand and you can see
right.
what the size is, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes this is one of my issues actually with selling art online, and that you and I have had this conversation more than once of how do people really judge not just the color but the size?
Right.
Unless
No,
there's a human body next to it, it's very, very difficult to do that. So one of the things that you have are some fabulous instructors. Can you tell me a little bit about them and what you have coming up? The events you have coming up.
amazing. So I just said goodbye today to Aldo Balding, and I don't know if you know him, but I first discovered Aldo on the cover of the American Art Collector magazine quite a while ago and fell in love with his work. He's really a master of light. and he's a master of figure painting. And he held a workshop here before. Right now we have an art retreat, which means no instructor, but I invited him and his wife Sarah to stay on with us because it really enriches the group, to have like such a professional artist who's hanging out at an art retreat.
Right.
Why not? And then also we had Vanessa Roth, who was doing her business side of art, which was rather lovely. And then coming up in about 3 days' time, we have Olga Cremon coming, who's basically a Ukrainian artist who's living in Southern California. And I met Aldo and I brought him into the project called Americans in Paris. So Americans in Paris is a project that actually was started by Vanessa Roth. And she wanted to expose some of the finest painters in America to European culture, bring them to Paris, have them reignite maybe the conversations that were had by artists in the past. So if you look at the Impressionists and how that came about, and even before that, these classical artists, they would get together and they would be in that area, and so they would share ideas. And she really loved that, not just painters, writers like Fitzgerald and Hemingway and people like that. This actually happened. So they had a couple of shows, they made some money, and they allowed those artists to travel to Paris with Vanessa Roth. So it was like Jeremy Lipkin was there, Michael Klein, many, many, many fine artists. Olga was there. And then they came with the magazine and the publishers. So it was a real thing. And one thing that she really wanted to show them was multi-figure artwork, because a lot of these United States artists, by the way, I personally think are having a golden age of art here, and a realism in particular in America, but they didn't really do a lot of multi-figure work. So she really wanted to expose them to that. And one of the best people that I know that does that like that is Aldo Boulding. He can actually create multi-figure work out of his mind. He knows anatomy so well. And it's just remarkable when he presents it in such a fun way. So the Americans in Paris project, actually, today I was negotiating different chateaus because in 2026 they're coming again, and this time with Juliette Aristides, Jay Louis, and Nicolas Martin, who's actually a French artist who lives in Canada, and then Vanessa will be part of that. But next week, after I finish with Olga, I am going to go down to the south of France where I have a little house, and I'm going to kind of try and decompress for 4 days because it's kind of full on. Then I'm going to fly to Holland to actually scout the location we're doing for the Dutch cruise with Kwang Ho and Adrian Sign this July. So I'm one of these people, I have to scout where we go so that I know exactly what's there when we land, where we're going to. We have ground transportation that we're creating as well, bringing all the oil paints and all of that to meet these guests who are floating on this floating atelier.
Yeah.
Wow, right? So there's nothing like boots on the ground. So we're going to go to all the places, Utrecht and Antwerp and Bruges and Brussels, and where do we go and what do we see and what's the happening, where's a decent cup of
What can
coffee,
you paint? Yeah.
all that
What's
stuff.
available?
Yeah, and
Right.
actually it's going to start in July at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, where we have an exclusive reception and a private tour of the Rijksmuseum. And do you know what's happening there right now? The Night Watch has been completely restored, Rembrandt's Night Watch. And what they've discovered,
Oh my God.
absolutely, so you can watch all this. Okay, it's behind glass and people are actually working on it with their Q-tips and all of that. But what they've discovered is the varnish is so yellowed and so old that it actually wasn't a nighttime painting. It was a daytime painting. So all this is being revealed, and we'll be there to see it in action.
Oh my goodness. That's jaw-dropping. For art fans, that's just really, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah,
And then it's
that is
followed next
amazing.
day with a tour with hold on a second. Yeah, thank you. We're going to actually go to the Van Gogh Museum, or Van Gogh Museum, as you all pronounce it, and we'll have lunch there, and then we tour that museum, and then we're on the boat. So that's just another thing. We're also having Dave Santianis this year, who's a terrific painter. We're just doing so many. Ron Hicks. We're having Ron Hicks come to.
Oh, I saw that on one of your newsletters. Yeah. Oh, he's fabulous.
Wow, 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 wow. Have you done?
But it's funny. I'm not a painter, as you know. My father was, and he actually did the painting over behind
Yes.
me over here. And he was mainly a watercolorist. But I'm not a painter, but I have to say that it's very tempting, even for somebody who's not. And actually, can you say a little something about, let's say there's a couple that has where one is a painter and one is not, and they might want to attend. How do you handle that?
Okay, so that is a very good question. And it is something that we actually encourage as for non-painting partners, because quite honestly, when we go on location and we're standing there painting that, they don't have to stop at an easel. They can wander off, go to a cafe and go inside that church, check out that museum, do a little retail therapy in that market. We're sitting there painting away. So there's always lots to do for non-painting partners, especially
Right.
if you're doing landscape stuff. But even for Ron Hicks, where there's an entire day in Florence where we give them access to the Uffizi. We're going to see David's in the Academia, and and so on and so forth. And also we go to San Gimignano where they have all the towers. It's just layer upon layer of fantastic. And the number of times I hear best day ever every single day,
Right.
because there's just something really wonderful about that. And it really helps us be able to keep it affordable, and not overwhelm the instructors. So that's the beauty of non-painting partners for me from basically a logistics point of view, that I can fill. Because here's the thing, I rent castles or yachts or boats or whatever I'm renting. I have to fill them. So it's a lot of risk for me. And I don't want to, say, have an instructor with 20 students, because that's not very elegant. And I don't think it's very fair for the guests. And I don't think it's very fair for
Right.
the instructor. So in order to do that, we have non-painting partners come. See how that works? And it's just a
Yeah.
smart way of doing it. And yeah, that's what we do. So you should come, Margaret, because I'll tell you what, the non-painting partners are so vital. They bring things to the conversation. They bring an outside viewpoint, and we've made the best friends. So on this one that I'm on right now, it's quite a small art retreat in that we only have 14 guests and my crew, so it's about 19, 20 of us.
Mhm.
Um, every single one of them, except for three, are repeat customers. And we have two
Wow, that
non-painting
says a
partners.
lot.
That's a
Yeah.
lot, right? Every single
Yeah.
person is a non-paint is a repeat customer. I mean, we're going around. We had almost like a smackdown last night because Keith from Australia was arguing with Brenda from Canada. She's been 10 times and he's only been 9 times because he was in the pandemic. They were locked down. It's magic because Brenda loves Keith. I mean, they've turned up at similar ones before, and she's been to Australia with her husband to visit the Australians, and then she's been to Hawaii to visit Susie in Hawaii, and that
Wow,
would
they're making
happen if I hadn't
friendships.
done that. The friendships, and they're outside of us, and
Yeah.
it makes my heart sore because those are actually the stats. Those are our stats. That's what we want. Like how much more connections made, how many more paintings are painted, how do people feel inspired? These are what we look for. It's not that selfish. How can I get to France and travel anymore? I do that now, routinely. It's more like
Right.
we index our success on their success and their joy. Love it.
Right. So the purpose now. I mean, I think you've pretty much covered that of what you're doing now, and the artists that you have coming up. But I think that your website is really great at describing what it is you have. Workshopsinfrance.com. So for those of you either watching us or mainly listening, it is traditional spelling workshopsinfrance.com. And you can see all the things that you have coming up. And you've also started programming for next year so people can sign up for next year.
Oh, yes, we're actually just launching it right now. We're about to send out a newsletter tonight. So that's also happening while we're running a workshop. Somebody's in charge of that, the newsletters. And the one we're sending out is actually tips, tricks, tools. It's like how do you carry home wet paintings, what's the
Oh,
business?
that's brilliant.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so we have all sorts of tips and tricks in that, which we've developed over the years. We just did a
Hmm.
new one. I show people this because it's kind of unique. I actually learned it from Kwang Ho, but it's how to clean your brush. So we're in this beautiful chateau, but it has like a septic tank. It's not hooked up. We can't be throwing chemicals into the environment here. So it's how to have a jar of oil and a jar of solvent and clean I ask them to give me their filthiest brush and I do this demo. And by the end of it, that brush is so clean. And you look at the oil jar and you look at the solvent jar and they're also uncontaminated. And all the dirt is ended up on paper towels and into the garbage. So that's what we dispose of. And it's just
Wow.
this technique we've developed using oil to clean the brushes thoroughly. And then the only at the end you dab a little bit of solvent on just to get the oil off of there, and now you have a very, very clean and conditioned brush. And it's fabulous. So there's these little hacks that we do. It's not all about buy,
Right.
sell this workshop. We do that. And we also, I did two, this is my third interview today. Can you believe that? So I interviewed Aldo this morning before he left, and then I interviewed one of our guests, Jane from Texas. And Jane, I'm not going to tell you all about her, but she did this program. I thought people really need to know this. It's called the Exodus Project. And she, with a nonprofit in her area, paints women who have been incarcerated, and then they go to like a halfway house, and they have to go through a program where they're taught skills and they're taught how to groom themselves, and they help them get them back on their feet. And when they finish that program, she paints their portrait of the women and sometimes with their children, and then she presents it to them because they didn't finish the
Oh, that's
program. I just
lovely.
like, what? I
Yeah,
have to talk
that's
to her about
lovely.
this. Isn't that wonderful? I mean,
That is.
yeah.
That is wonderful.
So
So
I
if
get,
people
yeah.
really want to sign up, learn more, they can go to
Workshops in France, and
workshopsinfrance.com.
also follow us on Instagram because you can see live what we do. There's people painting, or it might be an instructor, and we have a lot of fun. We're a bunch of goofballs, absolutely. So we do fun videos, and just we try and give people what's the experience, because you can go to a school and you can learn something. So what's the difference? Why come all this way? It's because there's something about, coming to another country that makes you just so alive. And then you're working with the very, very top instructors in an environment that's nothing short of aesthetic. It's extraordinary. So it's different from just pure teaching. That's why they're longer. That's why it's not like a 5-day workshop. They're like 9, 10 days. That gives you a chance to be immersed into the environment. We just try and make it as ideal as possible, because
It
only
sounds
then
great.
can you go home and you go, well, this is my life and that's what I experienced. So how can I make my life just a little bit more ideal, right? That's why we do what we do.
Right. Well, it sounds fabulous, Julie, and hats off to you for,
Thank you,
doing
Margaret.
this, the logistics of this. I used to be a production coordinator in the film business, and what you're doing is very similar to what I used to used to do,
I
because
know.
there are just so many balls in the air all the time.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, and also, if you want to see more of Julie's work, you can visit my website, danelakfineart.com, and that's Daniel with an AK, fine, Fine, art, art.com, and you can read about me and also read about Julie on my website.
Right.
So, yeah, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram. You're on Facebook and Instagram. Workshops in France is on Facebook and Instagram. And then you have a newsletter. People can sign up for your newsletter and really get the details about what's happening with your workshops and what you have coming up.
Absolutely. Because sometimes you
Right.
do things, they sell out immediately. So, people want to know what's going on. They should definitely sign up for that. And I'll put those links, I'll put graphics of those links into the video so people can see how they're
Okay.
and so forth. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And I'll put them below. So in the comment section, if we post this on YouTube, if we post it on YouTube, we should, then we'll have it
Yeah.
in the comment section, all the links so to Margaret's site and to my workshops in France. Okay.
Right. Cool. All right, Julie. Well, it's lunchtime here, and I think it's what, nighttime there.
Right. Fun
So,
stuff.
well, good. Thank you so much, and I guess we'll wrap it up now, and then
Yeah.
I think we should do another one, and we'll just find another topic to discuss.
Well, the next time I'll interview you. How about that?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I tell you what, you and I have worked together on so many projects. Margaret,
Right.
you do so much for the community in Pasadena and for women artists, right? You celebrate women
Yeah,
artists,
I
which is
really
very
do.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
do feminist museum tours. I've given actually received grants to do feminist museum tours,
that's
and
right.
I'm hoping to do one for a private group at the Huntington coming up. And then in September, I think I may have mentioned to you, I'm trying to find space to do a great big group show.
Love it.
So that's my
Wonderful.
right. So
Great.
anyway, I'm working on that.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, Margaret, thank you
All
very
right,
much for having me.
Julie.
Okay.
Thank you. Take
Et
care.
bonsoir tout le monde. Eh?
Okay, and just go ahead and send me the info.
I will do.
All
Okay.
right. Okay.
Bye, Anto.
A biento. Bye.
Bye bye.